Takes a while, get there eventually.
Oh, I love it.
So welcome to episode 16 of Rethinking Trauma and Transition, where we have our very special guest and friend, Cuddy Cudworth from Priority Mind Management.
I love how you're reading all the stuff in the background as if
I am, mate,
we're best friends, Rich. I love that.
We are.
Not at all. Photographic memory, Rich has, don't you, Rich?
So would you like to give our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself, Cuddy?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a mind management coach. I coach people from where they are and past anxiety, stress, depression, which is quite a broad genre to be working in. And as we were talking, I don't niche because I've been working with kids to adults to ladies to men, and I've been, would I say successful? No, but I've had a lot of big wins. I never went looking for working with trauma clients, but it turned out a lot of the anxiety that people had come from, we were going through conversations about trauma and things like that. And I was like, right, wow, okay, fantastic. And I love the title of your show, your podcast, which is Rethinking Trauma and the Transition. Because, Rich, we have known each other for quite a while, because I had one on my radio show a while ago.
Yeah. And, well, we first introduced on Orlando's NLP thing, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a big fan of NLP, but what I will say is mind management is much more than NLP. That the whole kind of training that we do with all our coaches at Priority Mind Management is so much more than NLP. Because a lot of people are saying, well, what's the difference between mind management, NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy? And I'm like, we've kind of fused and created some new modalities that we use with our clients to get them moving forward. And that's why we created mind management at Priority Mind Management, in all fairness. And the tools that we used, it's funny because a lot of the coaches that come in and say, oh, I've used it and it works. I'm like, of course it works. It moves people forward. It helps them shift their perspective, change their understanding. It helps them with transition, using your words, Ali.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it in particular that caught your eye about our podcast?
It was trauma. It was the rethinking trauma, because I had some questions, because I've got some coaches that say, oh, I don't want to work with trauma because of their beliefs and their understanding of trauma. And then I started having a lot of people come and asking me and saying, oh, can you work with trauma? And I have a very simplistic view on things. And I'm like, yes, I can, if you're ready to move forward. Literally, if you're ready to move forward. That's the question I ask them. And they're like, yeah, I am ready to move forward. I said, right, let's work on it and let's get you moving forward with not only just no anxiety, but like minimal amount of anxiety. You can still get anxious, as we all get anxious, but actually not having that label. Anxiety, the label. And I know we're going to talk about the labels and the problem's not the problem. And the problem's not the problem, I think, is a huge part of what we're going to talk about, because I'm excited to talk about that.
Well, that was when we were talking about this, that we said, what are we going to angle are we going to take it from? And that was the problem is not the problem.
But also, Cuddy, you're dealing with people who are at threshold, aren't you? And they're willing to move forward and do the work because they've realized what they've been doing no longer serves a purpose.
Correct.
So they're looking for something better.
Yes. Most of my clients have been in therapy, they've been in counseling, and they didn't get the result that they wanted, which was, I want no to non-existent anxiety. Yes, getting anxious. We have to make sure everyone's listening that being anxious is a perfectly normal response. It's a little bit of fear that's popping up in our lives, but you can move forward in life without our past traumas really, really driving you to where you've gotten to at this moment in time. And I think that was a really powerful thing that I'd been able to do with some of the clients that I'd worked with using mind management.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wanted to come on and speak to you.
So there are layers in trauma,
yes,
in terms of the depth and I suppose the complexity of it. And a lot of people have a misunderstanding and get fixated on the event.
Correct.
When working with trauma. And a lot of standard therapeutic interventions will focus and fixate on the event.
Correct.
It's the Andy Austin's IENT model, isn't it? With a key linchpin is what somebody was thinking at the time, what somebody might have said at the time, an action that didn't take that caused harm to somebody else in that other interaction going on with the other.
Yeah. So what you've got is you've got the physical event, the emotional event. But as Rich and I will often talk about, an event is intrinsically neutral. It is just that, an event.
Yep.
It might be horrific.
Yep.
But that's our decision we make over the nature of the event. The event is just an event.
Correct.
The trauma happens in our response to that event.
Correct.
And it's the response. The trauma is the response.
Yes. And that's why when we did the little pre-podcast chat, I knew we were on the same page. Because once I'd been working with these clients, it was not the event that there was a problem with. And it was, there's an emotional label that they create themselves, which would be guilt, shame, the decision they made about it. Why was I in that position? Why was I there? And all those kind of things. There's a label and association. I always talk about the monkey mind. So when I'm working with clients, you know, people can call it the bullet between the ears, but I work on monkey mind. So when I'm working with somebody right there, I always ask them about their internal thought process, their internal decision-making process. I said, because we can sit there with a smile on his face, but what are you saying quietly to yourself? And it's the labels that we create quietly within ourselves that's actually more damaging. The negative self-talk, however we want to talk about it, but the negative self-talk is just as damaging as a lot of the things that we have, and that's what I've been working with. And that's when I've been working with clients, it had turned out that it wasn't the event, like you said, it wasn't the event. It was the decisions about the event, the emotions that they attached to the event, and the blame that they had for themselves. It was the blame.
Well, I think there's a huge array of emotions that get attached
Absolutely.
to those. I talk about labels a lot, and we were having some of that discussion before we came in. And Rich and I were having a conversation earlier in the week about my student days and the fact that I had lapel badges all the way down my suit jackets, because I used to wear tuxedo jackets all the time.
Yep.
And each of those were a phrase that I had picked off a stall that I particularly liked, that amused me, that made me smile or laugh or whatever. It was almost like 5-word commentaries on the world.
Yep.
I chose to put them on, and I chose to keep them on my lapels. And every time I changed jacket, I chose the ones that I put on the lapels. And I think the challenge is that sometimes we forget that we choose the labels we wear.
Also, what we've discussed beforehand as well is some people may go and see a therapist or whomever, or read up on the interwebs. These are the symptoms of anxiety or depression, and whomever they're dealing with has given that person that label of you're anxious, you're depressed, and that person then kind of fulfills that role of being anxious and depressed. And also some of these labels that people do have of, as we mentioned before, Ali, is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Whereas, is it a disorder or is it an injury? And how much can somebody recover from an injury?
Because the words we choose to describe ourselves are important. They put an inference on those in terms of our future actions, our capacities, our capabilities, and our resilience levels. And that's also where, quite often, when we're experiencing something adverse, something that isn't working for us in our thinking patterns and responses, the big challenge is finding the language to explain to somebody what's happening with us, because we will explain what's happening in that moment or recent, not necessarily all of that. And that means that quite often there's a very high prevalence of misdiagnosis because of what was presented at that point in time. Yep. So trauma may be missed, or it may be diagnosed as something alternative to that. And as a result, you end up with a treatment plan that, while addressing the symptoms and what you presented with, actually doesn't present or address the root cause of the issue, because you didn't have the language at the time to describe that fully, or the capacity maybe to describe that fully.
Yeah. It's a bit like when we had our pre-chat, Cuddy. I'm probably going to put you on the spot here. Is you
Pre-chat.
Aye, but that lady who you said it's a bar.
Yes, I always talk about one of my clients, because she was a phenomenal lady. She was put towards me from it was word of mouth, actually, and we went through something, and she'd mentioned that she'd been through therapy and she'd done counselling, but she still just had this severe anxiety, and she was getting fed up of it. And I asked her, how is it you can do that, but you can't do that? And the second I asked, because that was actually really hard, what she was going to do. I mean, that was the lady can lift more weight than most people. And the second I asked that question, it clicked in place with her. Oh, because that's just a bar. And the second she said that, she kind of looked around to everything else in her life and went, oh, it's just a bar, isn't it? And she just created a new thought track and a new conversation of, oh, it's just a bar. And she'd text me, I'm like, oh, I'm on a train. I've not been on a train in 12 years. Can't believe it. I'm on a train. It's just a bar, Cuddy. It's just a bar. Just by asking that question that just opens that up in the moment. And then I always check in with her now, and we do a few other things together and stuff like that. And we always check in, and I'm like, how's the anxiety? She went, I don't have time for it, Cuddy. I don't have time for anxiety anymore. And that's a fantastic thing for people to be able to understand, that I don't have time for anxiety, because a lot of the times it does come from the anxiety with or without trauma, because there'll be a lot of people saying, well, why have I got anxiety, but I've not really gone through a trauma. Does come from just we're creating those stories and those conversations that build up.
Well, I heard somebody describe procrastination quite differently to me this week, and I'm going to apply that in the anxiety discussion as well. Because if we look at the fight, flight, freeze mechanism, then you could say that actually anxiety is a freeze.
Yep.
If it's a freeze, then what your body's doing is conserving energy in the moment for further action. You're in energy conservation. That means that chances are it recognizes that you're exhausted, that you're overwhelmed, that there's too much going on. So I need to pull back and let the battery recharge and to refill the tanks, because there's future action required there. So in some way our brain is saying, slow down, stop, pause.
Yeah.
It's just that sometimes we misinterpret the signals.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because the range of physiology, so if you've got your logical brain and you've got your emotional brain, and that one side is your thinking, the other side doesn't have any way to communicate apart from through your physiology. It's got, because it's all emotion, so it's got to somehow express and create that emotion. And your logical brain's going, okay, we're playing emotional charades again. Is it a film? Is it a book? Is it a TV program? I don't know. And it's looking for context for an environment to place that emotional physiological response.
Yeah.
And then it's doing a bit of guesswork.
Yeah.
Which is why when you look at the actual anatomy of anxiety, it's very, very similar to excitement. It's just contextually, we will place it in a different box and go, therefore I must be anxious.
It's also, I think, as well, is people spend, in the Western world probably at least, too much time in their head and not enough in their body.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I totally get where you're coming with that. And the miscommunication that we have for ourselves, for our feelings, actually send us into a completely, and it's the same, and I know it's a really old way to explain it, is I do ask a lot of my clients, where does your anxiety start? And they'll always say it starts in my stomach. I feel cramps. I've got the stomach and da-da-da. And I always, it's just a simple way of doing it. Is like when you go on a roller coaster, are you scared? Are you excited? Oh, I'm excited. I love it. And I said, where does that feeling come from? Oh, it's the stomach. And it's the same feeling, but the label that we create to it is what creates that emotional disturbance within ourselves. And it is mislabeling. So, but are we now not touching on a point of everything is mislabeling? So why are people, and I think it's a phenomenal thing, because we were talking about the lady
Well,
who...
before we move on, can I just make another point in that anxiety is time-bound? Anxiety is future-paced.
Oh, absolutely.
And part of the context that our brain looks for is the future thinking.
Yep.
Now, the problem with the future thinking is the number of contingencies that we then have to open up to try and manage also. Because the future is multi-stranded. The present is one strand, the past is one strand, the future is multi-stranded. And the further out you go, the more strands there are to manage.
And it's a very big word you use there for Ali. I did tell you before we started the podcast, the reason I've been so successful is I'm really simple. That's a large word. I'm going to have to go back into my thesaurus when we come back. But however...
Which one? Which word?
Multi-stranded. I was going Marvel Universe there. I'm like, right, now we're in the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Right, now I know where we are.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. The multiverse, yes.
Absolutely. We're
You're
creating
now managing the
multiverses,
entire multiverse.
but we're creating our multiverses from our past experience. So but our past experiences don't actually conclude what's going to happen in the future.
No, they
Well,
don't.
they can predict the future.
Well,
do you know what? I was airing on Ali. I was like, no, you can't. Nope.
I think they can, in some situations, influence our future because they shape our responses in the present. And our responses in our present will then interact in such a way that we almost become self-fulfilling prophecies of our thinking.
I mean, literally, I would have said it a lot more simpler. I'm going Spider-Verse, but you're absolutely bang on there, Ali. Is we absolutely say what our future is going to come from our past, and it was actually what you were talking about, Ali. It was what you were talking about the other day, and I know you'll have mentioned it in a previous podcast. And I was speaking to another coach about it. Is if the seed, the trauma response is not serving you no longer, it becomes a weed. The trauma response was there for a reason in the past, but it doesn't have to be there for you moving forward. We have to understand it. We have to acknowledge it and moving on going, yes, that happened then, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen now. And I thought your trauma response, the way you used it, was absolutely fantastic, Ali. I was like, that was, I will always mention, whenever I talk about that, I will always reference you on that one, Ali, because that was a really great way. Is our past does not predicate our future in any way whatsoever.
No.
But if we have a decision process and our beliefs about our past, it will predicate our future, because we're definitely going into the multi-strands of the universe in the future based on the what ifs of the past.
And what we're comfortable with.
Correct.
How many seconds are there in a minute, Cuddy?
There are 60, Ali. I don't
How
need a calculator.
How many
for that.
seconds are there in an hour?
1,200.
How many seconds are there in a morning or an afternoon?
Look, I didn't get my maths GCSE. If I'm honest. Did I get the second question right, which is 1,200?
Right. I'm now going to get to my point.
Right.
Each of those seconds, each and every single one of those, is an opportunity for reinvention.
It is.
It's our experience made brand new.
Absolutely. And we can do analogies and metaphors all day long, but I love the one that, every day is a new chapter in your book. You can rewrite it. It's right. It's absolutely right. But with I said to you before we started the podcast, do you think, why are people looking for a label? They have a feeling that the feel's not right, and they're looking for a label to make that emotional reasoning bang on. Do you remember I told you about the lady that was, I just met her. Someone said, oh, Cuddy, what do you do? I said, oh, I'm a mind management coach. I help people get past anxiety. Keep it as simple as possible. And then the exact response was, oh, I think I have post-stress. I always say it wrong, Rich.
Post-traumatic stress.
Yes. And I was like, why do you need that label? Oh, because I want to know what if there's not anything going wrong? Oh, well, why do I feel like it this way? Well, let's find out.
I think to a certain extent, labels can be useful, but it's how that label is applied to that person, that individual, and what they take away from that as well.
Does the label have to define you?
No.
Is that not because I always use Tom Stoltman, who has autism, and he has his label to empower him. He went, no, autism's my superpower. I mean, that's right there. That's how you use the label.
Yes. There's another guy I know, and he's got ADHD, diagnosed with it.
Yeah.
The doctors asked him why he wanted to do it. Did he want medication? He goes, no, I want to have an understanding of what it's all about, so my wife and family can have a better understanding of me and how I go about the world. So that's a use for a label in a positive sort of aspect, not having to go to medication or that sort of stuff to do whatever that stuff does.
Yes.
The label isn't useful when you become that label.
When it becomes a limiting factor for you.
Like you said, the self-proclaimed prophecy. And I hear of so much these days of people are just self-diagnosing. They want that label so they've got an option to choose different things in life, which is the self-diagnosis part, which is always a tricky one. Because when I've worked with people, I've always asked them, where's that because I don't diagnose. I've always said that. I said, look, no, I don't diagnose. Where are you? Where do you want to be? Let's bridge the gap. We've got the tools to bridge the gap. And the self-diagnosis. So because coming back to the title of the podcast, which is the problem's not the problem. And I think that's a really powerful understanding for coaches or anything like that, is the problem and the stories that we create are probably not the problem. When we deep dive a little bit more by asking those questions, we can find out where the real problem is sometimes, which would be a decision or an emotional aspect of it, which is...
Or a thought pattern or a belief.
Correct.
Because those labels can be empowering, or they can be a box that constrains us. The choice is ours to make on that.
Well, it's also, people use these labels as a crutch. So it's, look at me, I've got this a victim mindset, and everybody comes around them, helps them out. You don't love me unless I have this.
Do you know what? We've talked about that an awful. I'm glad you've touched about that. And I think victim mindset should be always explained, because if there is a victim out there, they'll be like, oh, well, do I have a victim of a mindset? It's like, no, actually, I know a lot of people who have actually been a victim of something. They do not actually have a victim mindset in any way whatsoever. But that victim mind, so I was I'll even explain that. I was stuck in victim mindset for about 6 months. That was actually my depression. I always say that was my depression. Didn't know it. Nearly lost my wife because of it. Nearly lost my job because of it, because something happened. I couldn't focus with it. Not a trauma in any way. It was me just not understanding something that had happened to me. And I was like, wow, that's what actually sent me on this journey of learning and helping others. And victim mindset came along, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's me. Oh, God, I have to put my hands up to that. Head down. I'm like, right, okay. And the chemicals we create, which is actually a happiness chemical, keeps us stuck in the depressed state. It keeps us stuck. So we're creating oxytocin, which is the cuddle chemical, because people are coming over and reaffirming, oh. And I was like, wow, what a fantastic thing that we have in our life to create that chemical, but it keeps us stuck in a depressed state. We create the happiness, which keeps us. And I was just like, wow, unbelievable. It keeps us stuck in that mindset. So we feed that importance, that emotional need of importance, in a negative way. And if people are not understanding of their emotional needs, if importance comes on and you're feeding that negatively, you're going to stay stuck and not going to be able to move forward. And I think that's an absolute fascinating thing for a lot of people to learn and understand, is how we get stuck in our depression because of that simple mindset. And I think that's an amazing thing for people to talk about.
I think that's about there's sometimes is the very fine balancing act where we have to assess whether or not it serves a purpose is more to stay where we are or move forward.
Yep.
And that depends on what we want from our lives, where we place our repertoire or our list of needs and wants and how we want to achieve that or live our life.
Yep.
And that comes again to whether or not that label constrains us or empowers us. And what does it deliver for us?
It becomes part of our identity, doesn't it?
Well, I think we have a choice of the labels we wear and how long we wear them for.
I get that. You get that. But people don't understand the power of identity in life.
No,
and when
don't.
you explain the power of identity, there'll be a lot of people look at you and go, nah, it's not that simple. I'm like,
where's the I am statement?
It is the I am. And use it, I think, look, to explain that for people as well. If a lot of people that have lost their job and I'm a postman, their entire life, when somebody said, who are you? Oh, I'm a postman. I'm a postman. I'm a postman. You lose your job, you're no longer a postman. That identity of, well, who am I if I'm not a postman? Well, no, that was your job. That's not your identity. Let's find out who you are. Let's come back to your actual identity. I'm a father. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a brother. I'm a carer. I'm a provider. That's the labels you want to be looking for, not that label. And that's why we get stuck in depression, because, well, I'm depressed. Let's find out why. Again, that's a simplification of a bigger picture that we like to create more fear within ourselves with what we create up here than actually what the genuine problem is. Again, the problem's not the problem.
Well, it's also about where we seek value from. Is it internally generated or externally generated? Are we reliant on external validation, or are we capable of internally validating? Now, I'm going to go back to labels, because I think sometimes that challenge of misdiagnosis, that challenge of not having the language to describe what we're doing, is a big, big problem. And there are times, particularly with trauma, where actually the label is a pivot point for change, where finally you're able to go, now I get it. Now I understand why I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing. Because for a lot of people that Rich and I work with, actually the challenge is they come to us and they think it's just them that actually I feel, and I don't even want to talk about it because I feel like I'm nuts. This is just, this isn't, there's stuff going on in my head and I'm experiencing stuff and I don't understand why. And I know there's stuff that's happened in my past and that's probably, they're telling me that's because of it. But why is this still happening now? And it's impacting all areas of my life. And one of the first challenges is to start to de-escalate that. There's something wrong with me, and go, well, actually, your brain's just doing normal shit. It's just in the wrong place.
Yep, absolutely. The amount of times, the labels that we create, until I knew, so I'll go, absolutely, until I knew what Monkey Mind was, I thought I was having, I used to work on cruise ships.
So can I just clarify for the listeners who might not be familiar with things like the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, etc.
Absolutely.
What you're talking about by that is really your emotional brain.
The emotional brain is the monkey mind. It's the conversations we have with ourselves. If you are not aware of those conversations, how normal they are, and how a lot of the conversations that we have. So the best way I explain monkey mind is when you go to bed at night time, your head hits the pillar and the floodgates open up. Everything that's happened to you in the day, the week, the month, the year just starts going round and round and round. And you sat there, you're laid in bed going, why can't I turn this off? Then we have an interrupted sleep. We can't go. I couldn't have a conversation with we would go out for a meal and I was so locked up in here, I couldn't have a conversation with my wife. And my wife was like, we've sat here for an hour. I've asked you 4 questions. You've not responded. and you are locked up in here. And that was when I went to the doctor and I said, what is it? I said, and they were like, oh, you're having suicidal thoughts. I went, no, not really. I said, no. Oh, it's depression. And that was like, well, what do you mean it's depression? Oh, well, here's a tablet for it. I'm like, nope. Nope. What? I said, what else do I do? And the doctor just sat and looked at me and went, yeah, it's a tricky one. And that's why I actually did originally get into NLP. That was the first thing I Googled, right? How do I get past depression? I Googled it. And all these books popped up. I'm like, what is NLP? What is NLP? What is NLP? And I got more and more into it. I'm like, oh my God, I do that. And right, for anyone, I always recommend one book. One book, Stop Thinking, Start Living by Richard Carlson. Because that literally, I was like, every chapter, tick, tick. That's me. That's me. Not looking for a label, but I'm like, all right, okay, so this is normal. This is normal. Because when you're sat there going, what is wrong with me? Again, Rich, Ali, primary questions. It's the questions that we ask. We get those results and the replies. And if you've not slept well, or if you've not looked after yourself, the retorts and the answers to the questions are vile, putrid. Why did I do this? Because you're an arsehole. Because you're this. Because you're that. These start compounding and creating these labels that we have with ourselves. And it's always wanting to get that message out to people to, right, let's work on that, because that's probably the problem. That's not the problem. Let's go.
Well, that's the difference, isn't it, between trying to fix the symptom or fix the root cause, find the root cause and resolve that.
And that's, do you know what, Ali? Richie sat there going, but that's the premise of the logo at Priority Mind Management. Anxiety is the symptom. It's not the problem. Mind management gets to the root cause. We pull it out. And guess what? You start flourishing. Those leaves grow. That's the whole premise. The problem's not the problem. Anxiety, stress, depression are a symptom of something over here. So while you're going to the doctors and talking about this, and I'm not shaming doctors in any way, I think doctors probably have such a tough time because they've got 10 minutes to listen to you and go, right, it's probably this, do this. But it's not over there. It's over here. That's why we always say the problem's not the problem. So thanks. Right. Okay. There's your anxiety. Right. I need to talk to you over here because that's where the problem is. I love that. That was the whole premise of the logo. The problem's not the problem.
And that's also where that rethinking part comes from, because in that rethinking, and I'm going to be quite controversial here, anything that changes that thinking pattern has the capacity to create enough space for us to have that light bulb moment that goes, shit, that's what's happening. And that's when our inner truth shifts, because we can logic something to death, but unless it feels true for us, nothing changes.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes when our heads are so full of all those inner dialogues, inner critics, those circular thinking that we all have experienced from time to time, we don't have space to step back and actually observe what's actually happening and where it's actually come from. We don't have space to reflect on what is our inner truth. Now,
so question. Sorry, carry on, Ali.
Well, for me, for some people, actually going to the GP and getting a prescription might help create that because it slows the thinking down. For others, it's a conversation with people like Rich or yourself, Cuddy, or myself.
Yeah.
And that choice has to be an individual choice.
Yeah.
Well, the question is then, what are you going to rethink and transition into to do?
And that's where the fun begins. That's where there are so many possibilities.
And I think you said, I think you used the right word there, fun, because I what you see is what you get with me. And when I'm working with clients, when we do like the chemistry call, I'm like, look, a few things you need to know. I'm not a therapist and I'm not a counselor. I'm solution-based. Where are you? Where do you want to be? You have to be able to like the fact that I've got a silly haircut. I'm 46 and I'll probably have a little bit of jovialness while we're doing this. Are you all right with that? And the amount of clients that say to me, do you know that? I think that's what I'm looking for, to be honest with you. I'm looking to realize it's probably not as bad as what I think and I can move forward. And I'm like, That's the secret to the sauce right there. For that transition and rethinking it is a powerful thing.
Well, long may my inner self be 8 years old.
That's a Scottish thing. Rich, have you heard that before? Because I'm like, right, I don't know where we're going with this, but
No.
long may you be, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm guessing that's about being curious about as who you are and who you can be and the world around you.
Curious and open-eyed and being able to explore that curiosity with a level of wonder.
I love exploring the world with wonder. Do you know how many times that upsets people?
Lots.
Yeah. Yeah. I have
So-
a lot of people is like, you're just not serious enough. I'm like,
Yeah.
nope, you're absolutely right. That's me.
The weekend I was with a friend of mine and he brought his 2 kids along. So we went off to go and get some coffees and all that sort of stuff. And I was chatting to his 5-year-old across the table. And he was telling me how the universe worked, about stegosauruses. And then later on, he was chatting about how the eye worked and all that sort of stuff.
Brilliant.
I bet that was the best conversation of the weekend.
It was. You can learn a lot from a 5-year-old.
You can. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where you remember exactly what an amazing place the world is.
Yeah.
When you're curious about it.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed today.
So, yeah.
Us too.
And I know that we're coming back, because I'm coming back with Graham, my business partner at Priority
You
Management.
are indeed, yes.
That'd be awesome.
Look, thank you very much for inviting me in. Absolute pleasure. For anyone that is listening, I think they should absolutely get in contact with you two, Rich and Ali. I like the fact that people are trying to rethink trauma, destigmatize it, lessen the actual scare and fear around it is an important part, I think, for the conversation. It's okay to have a label as long as it doesn't define you. And I will always say that the problem's not the problem. You're absolutely right. The problem's not the problem. Thank you.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you for coming on, Cuddy.
Thank you
Absolute
so much.
pleasure.
And we'll, if anybody
Can't
wants to get in touch with Cuddy, then we'll pass on your contact details.
Yeah, we've put your details in show notes and all that sort of stuff.
Perfect. Not a problem. I can't wait. Send me a link and I'll share it for everybody, because it's a great conversation to have. And the more people that have trauma and think they're stuck with it for the rest of their life, nope, you don't have to be stuck with it for the rest of your life in any way whatsoever. And remember, the problem is not the problem. It never is. Thank you.
Have a lovely day, Cuddy.
Thank you, Cuddy, and yeah, take care.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. So what did we talk about with Cuddy?
So we talked about labels and how there's that prestige with some therapists, and they can give somebody a label that's not necessarily useful, but labels can be useful for people to say, yeah, okay, I understand where I am, and now I can move on from here.
So we talked, so that comes back to that idea, isn't it, of, are you going to choose your label to enable you?
Yeah.
Or to constrain you?
We talked about, is the problem really the problem?
Root cause.
The root cause. And are you at threshold yet, or wanting to move on from where you are currently?
What's keeping you where you are?
Yeah. Can you pick that bar up and move on?
Yeah. And the capacity for change that's always open to us.
Yeah. And as well as, is your mind in the Spider-Verse, or is it in the universe?
How far out in your timeline are you?
Yeah.
And the other one that I really liked was, see, you throw me now with the multiverse reference because my head's off exploring the multiverse now again. We talked about exploring that world with wonder, didn't we? And that's also about our capacity to envision something different for us and be open to possibilities.
And you'll be amazed who you can learn from. even if it's something you think you already may know, or because you may have forgotten that thing.
Yeah. And we also talked about the challenge sometimes between our logical side and our emotional side, and how those are two very different languages. And sometimes messages get a bit fritzed in the process.
And are you stuck in your head? And do you need to get back into your body?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where
So,
can I find us, Ali?
you can find us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. So all you have to do is do a search for Rethinking Trauma and Transition, and we'll probably pop up in the lists all over the place. You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, on Apple, on Castbox, on umpteen different, Amazon Music, umpteen different podcast channels now. And you can leave us messages and comments as well, which
Absolutely.
we always like to see.
Yeah, cool.
And if they want to work with either you or ABRH,
They can get hold of me, email me info@resilientdefence.co.uk.
or ali@mojoandmind.com. And again, all of the contact details are in the show notes. We'll put Cuddy's in there as well if anybody wants to conversate with Cuddy.
Awesome.
Until next
Thank
time.
you a lot watching and listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.